Here we go. Here we go. Are we live? YouTube's having all kinds of problems this morning. They're struggling. Looks like we are live. YouTube Studio's still down. Live streams are really buggy, but yeah, I think we're good. I think we're up. 𝐒𝐿 Powell is going to be speaking here. This may be the second to last time that we hear from 𝐒𝐿 Powell as the Fed chair. We have the FOMC in April, and today he is going to be speaking at Harvard University. And while we have had nothing burgers at events like this in the past, this one could be good. Now, it's a Q&A session, a moderated panel, but I believe the students are going to be asking questions. And something tells me that that could lead to some very interesting things, some very interesting questions. I think maybe more hard-hitting or piercing or to kind of the economic point than we see during the FOMCs. This could be good. This could be good. Either way, we're covering it. We're covering it. It works out well. I'm almost moved into the new house. Oh my God, it's been a nightmare. And this is like the perfect thing to do today. After this stream, I'm actually going to pack up all the stream lab, all the equipment. I'm going to bring it over to the new house, have the internet sent over there, and hopefully wrap up this era over here. But he's supposed to be speaking now. Obviously, running a little late. Let me refresh my feed here. I'm going to pull it up once. Okay, he's not on. Going to pull it up once he's actually on stage, because I'm trying to find the best source for it. Looks like Associated Press has a feed. The Fed themselves doesn't have a feed for some reason. Who else got a feed? Who else has got a feed? I think that's it. Just Associated Press, question mark. All right. Well, we'll watch through there. Let me set this up. Just ready. If you could, hit the like button. Share. Subscribe. Hype it up. Markets are actually kind of spicy today. Let me jump into that if we have time in a minute. Although I don't think we have time.
It is my great pleasure to introduce the chair of the Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve System, Jerome Powell.
He's so tiny. I thought he was bigger than that. He's only this big.
Chair Powell's path
Chair Powell.
to the pinnacle of economic policy was not paved with mathematical modeling in an economics doctoral program, but rather with a deep study of institutions and laws. Raised in Washington, D.C., he attended Princeton University, where he earned a Bachelor of Arts in Politics in 1975.
Hey,
he then attended Georgetown University Law Center. While earning his law degree, he also served as editor-in-chief of the Georgetown Law Journal, one of the world's most influential and prestigious legal publications. He then started a career of extraordinary impact and breadth. He distinguished himself first in the private sector, working in investment banking and private equity, notably as a partner at the Carlyle Group, while repeatedly answering the call for public service. He served with distinction as Assistant Secretary and then Undersecretary of the Treasury under President George H.W. Bush. In 2012, he returned to public service as a member of the Federal Reserve Board of Governors. His nomination to serve as chair in 2018 by President Donald Trump, and then his renomination to serve as chair by President Joe Biden in 2021, stand as testaments to his bipartisanship. Chair Powell approaches economic stewardship with a philosophy grounded in empirical evidence, institutional humility, collaboration, and public service. Like the greatest Fed chairs in our history, Paul Volcker, Ben Bernanke, Chair Powell advances the interests of our nation and not his own, sometimes at great personal cost. We are immensely privileged to have him share his insights today. Please join me in warmly welcoming the Chair of the Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve System, Jerome Powell.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks very much.
Thank you. I hope they do the whole interview or the whole thing like this zoomed out.
So I'd like to start at the beginning of your career.
Oh my God, they're going to.
You studied politics and then law, and then eventually pivoted from that to public service. Were you thinking about public service and economic policy making at the start, or did all of that come as a surprise later? And how did you decide to make the pivot when you were in the middle of your career?
Let me start by saying, David, thank you so much for having me.
Okay.
And
Thanks
to all of you for being here today. It's great to be here. I've been looking forward to this.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I took macro and micro my freshman year, and it wasn't as interesting to me at that age than some other things, so I wound up majoring in politics, actually specializing in Africa. It's fair to say that my freshman major was acoustic guitar.
That's
my
crazy,
parents
actually.
gave me a Martin D35 for high school graduation. They must have regretted that because that's what I was really working on mostly. But I did finally figure out what I wanted to do. And when I graduated from college, I really had no plan, but I did have one thought, and that is to have a career in the private sector, but also to do public service intermittently. And I was thinking about people like George Shultz, who was famous at many economic jobs, and others who had done those sorts of things. And I grew up in Washington, D.C. My parents were not, my dad had fought in World War II, and he had been a U.S. attorney, but they weren't people who were terribly plugged in politically. I was very interested, though, in those years in public policy and in trying to create a life that was partly private sector and partly public sector, and amazingly enough, that's kind of what happened.
Great. So now, jumping right to the present, we talk about the Fed as a unitary entity, but of course, the Fed is led by the Federal Open Market Committee. There are 12 voting members. You, despite being chair, only have one vote. And in normal times, there's a lot of consensus. Everyone's in agreement. Lately, there's been some disagreement. There's been votes to keep interest rates the same, but some members of the FOMC have decided instead to vote to decrease interest rates. How does the disagreement on the FOMC make your job harder as you describe the path of economic policy going forward?
You know, I don't think of it as making my job harder. I think it's, and I've found throughout my career that when you have a really difficult problem, it helps to hear from all sides. And in a way, for example, when I was a private equity investor and I was looking at supporting a transaction that I wanted to do, I really wanted to hear from the smartest people. Tell me why it's a bad deal. Tell me now before we do it. And I just think you don't really know how much you believe in something until you've had somebody really try to take it apart. So I welcome that at the FOMC and at the Fed generally. And I think it helps us make better decisions. The Fed has had a tradition of governors not dissenting, but that's really not typical of other major central banks where there's more dissenting, or I mean, they're different, depends on the central bank. And to me, what matters is a dissent thoughtful? Is it helpful? Does it help? Does it express a point of view? Can you stand behind it and say, yeah, that's very thoughtful? And that kind of a thing is not bad. And it doesn't hurt with communications. You know, I think a situation like the present situation where, you know, there's sort of downside risk to the labor market, which suggests keep rates low, but there's upside risk to inflation, which suggests maybe don't keep rates low. You've got tension between the two objectives. And I think to try to expect unanimity at a time like that, where it's really quite historically challenging, it would almost be misleading to be really confident in which way that should go. In fact, it's been said that confidence is what you feel before you really understand the problem.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's turn to the Fed's balance sheet. In 2008, 2009, that great financial crisis, there was a massive expansion in the Fed's balance sheet. And then again in 2020, under your leadership, there was a second vast expansion in the Fed's balance sheet to address these two economic and financial crises. The balance sheet has since come down a bit, but it still sits at over $6 trillion. So I'd like to hear your views on how efficacious this vast bond buying program has been, both in the 2008 and then again in the 2020 episode, and also hear your reaction to the critics who say that the Fed has become too big a player in the bond market. The Fed has become too influential. There's been a muddying of, according to the critics, of monetary policy and fiscal policy. Do they have a point, or are they wrong?
So I think the place to start with that is the problem that people were struggling with from about 2008 to 2022, let's say, in central banking everywhere in the world is once you've cut interest rates to zero, do you have anything else you can do? Let's say you cut interest rates to zero and the economy is still clearly not flourishing and it wants more support. So do you just say, well, we're done, we're out of ideas here? And there were two ideas that were followed in the global financial crisis, one of which was to buy assets, longer-term assets, and what you're doing there is you're buying longer-term government-guaranteed securities, which would hold down longer-term rates, and that should stimulate the economy, or also forward guidance, which would tend to hold down forward rates as well, or just rates generally. So we did those two things rather than do nothing. And I think in the first instance, they were both efforts were successful at restoring market function and at restoring financial stability. At the beginning of the global financial crisis and the pandemic, we had massive problems of market function. They were solved. I think the question, getting to your question, David, of the macroeconomic effects is a much less certain question. I don't think there is an accepted answer, but I would just say there's an oceanic quantity of research on this, and overall it tends to find that buying long-term assets does lower interest rates and does provide some support for economic activity. And I guess I'd be in the camp of thinking that there's something in that, but it's hard to quantify it. And I think, different people have different views on how much those effects could be. The other side of it is, QE is thought by the critics to risk all kinds of other things. So, for example, you could buy too much of the Treasury market and it would stop functioning well. We have not seen that here. At the very beginning, there was the thought that it would be inflationary. We have not seen that, or that it would threaten financial stability or even create inequality. So we haven't really seen the downside risks. At the same time, the last thing I'll say is, I remember before I took over as chair thinking, I'll almost certainly never have to do quantitative easing. So what's that expression? Man plans and God laughs, something like that. So it just, the pandemic came around and we needed to do a lot of asset purchases in a big hurry, and we did. So far, yeah, you did. No Treasury Department has ever said, stop doing that, you're supporting the economy too much. Maybe that'll happen someday, but it hasn't happened yet.
Great. So let's talk about the dynamics of inflation since the spike in 2022. Inflation has been coming down since then, but it still hasn't reached its 2% target. Some have argued that that last mile is extremely difficult, and to obtain that, we will need a recession. Others have argued that you've gotten us very close and you'll get us the rest of the way. Are you concerned about the time duration of the path from the high inflation of 2022 back to target? It's taken time. We're not there yet. Is that a destination we'll reach, or are you concerned that the last mile will prove very difficult?
So we will reach, the FOMC is and will continue to be committed to getting inflation back to 2% on a sustained basis. That's the place to start. So I feel like we had pretty much gotten there at the end of 2024 against the predictions of almost the entire economics profession. When we raised rates a lot and very quickly in 2022, 100% essentially of economists were forecasting a recession. We didn't have one. Actually, we had 23 and 24 were both very strong years as the supply side healed and as our higher rates had some effect on inflation. So by 2024, you had the economy growing at 2.5%. You had inflation in the 2 plus a few tenths on a 12-month basis by the end of the year. And you had the employment market, you still had the labor market at essentially full employment. So I would call that a soft landing. We had it there. Then since then, we've had to face a much smaller source of inflation, which is the tariff inflation is visible, and we think it's really just a one-time price increase. That's been our thinking since the beginning. Right now, we think it's adding somewhere between 0.5 and a full percentage point to inflation, but that's a much smaller thing than we saw during the pandemic inflation. And,
they're actually getting into some stuff.
And of course, now we're facing events in the Middle East, which will certainly affect gas prices, and we feel like our policy is in a good place for us to wait and see how that turns out.
I didn't expect them to actually talk like policy.
Current crisis in the Middle East and the effect on energy prices. Indeed, this classroom is familiar with that question from the last problem set, where we asked, how would you advise the Fed to respond to the rising price of oil? And we teach that when there's a demand shock, it's a pretty natural set of recommendations that emerge for the Fed. But when there's a supply shock, like this energy price shock, there's trade-offs that the Fed has to juggle. How do you make those trade-offs in general, and how do you make those trade-offs in this particular instance? And can you help everyone with their piece?
Well, maybe they should tell me.
It's not a nothing burger.
Sure. So you start with what you said. Our tools work on demand. Higher rates will tend to moderate demand. Lower rates will tend to stimulate demand. And when you have a supply shock, our tool doesn't have meaningful shorter-term effects on supply. So when you have a supply shock, the first question is, do you respond to it? And the classic question has been around energy, just in general, not really speaking about the current situation, although I'll get to that, I guess. But, energy shocks have tended to come and go pretty quickly. Monetary policy works with long and variable lags, famously. And so by the time the effects of a tightening in monetary policy take effect, the oil price shock is probably long gone, and you're weighing on the economy at a time when it's not appropriate. So the tendency is to look through any kind of a supply shock, but a critical, essential aspect of that is you have to carefully monitor inflation expectations, because you can have a series of these supply shocks, and that can lead the public generally, businesses, price setters, households, lead them to start expecting higher inflation over time. Why wouldn't they? At the end of a certain number of years, the inflation is now just higher, and that can happen. So you monitor that very, very carefully. Also, in the current situation, you have to be mindful of the whole broader context. And the broader context is we're still, we've been coming down close to 2% post-pandemic, but we've never actually, gotten right and stayed at 2%. So it's been a while. And we're very mindful of that fact. Inflation expectations do appear to be well anchored beyond the short term, but nonetheless, it's something as we will eventually maybe face the question of what to do here. We're not really facing it yet because we don't know what the economic effects will be, but we'll certainly be mindful of that broader context when we make that decision.
Great. So you've been a powerful and vigorous defender of the independence of the Fed with respect to monetary policy. You've also been collaborative with administrations with respect to financial regulation. So under President Biden, you collaborated in a program of increasing regulation. Under President Trump, you've worked together to reduce regulation. So on the one hand, we've got an independent Fed with respect to monetary policy, and on the other hand, we have a collaborative Fed with respect to financial regulation. I don't think there's a tension there, but can you explain to us the two different approaches and how you understand them?
Yes, so start with monetary policy. I think there's pretty broad consensus in both political parties on both sides of Capitol Hill, and our oversight, by the way, is Congress, not the administration. But pretty broad agreement that on monetary policy, the Fed needs to be fully politically independent, not reactive to political things at all. We just need to do our job and stick to our knitting. Regulation is a little bit different, especially since Dodd-Frank, where the Dodd-Frank Act created something called the Vice Chair for Supervision, who has a specific statutory assignment, which is to oversee all of supervision and also set the agenda for regulation. So the Vice Chair for Supervision, if she wants to propose a change in, for example, the Basel III Accords as implemented in the United States, she has to bring that to the Board of Governors, which is the 7 governors, and vote for it. But she has full control over supervision. So as chair, you know, the whole idea is to be non-political and not, you know, never working for or against any political party or individual, or never even considering things like that. So I think the way the law works is the chair should allow the vice chair for supervision to carry out the role that Congress has assigned to that person by statute. And that's what that is. So you'll see, and you know, the 2 parties really have a big difference on regulation now. So I like to think that the chair should always be someone who is working without regard to political, and should be therefore a person who can be reappointed by either side. That's always been the case. It's been, you know, Ben Bernanke was reappointed, I was reappointed, and I think it's a good test of the Fed's nonpartisanship that your appeal is really bipartisan. I think that's a critical thing. So if I were to try to impose my personal views on regulation, that really wouldn't work. So I think there's I don't want to say deference, but any chair needs to let the vice chair for supervision take the lead on those issues, and then I'm another voter, is what I am.
Great. So let's talk about Dodd-Frank and the reforms to the financial system. 2008 was a terrible crisis, and there were many efforts made in the years afterwards to tighten the bolts and create a safer financial system, less prone to these kinds of cataclysmic events. But today we look out of the world and we see lots of threats, both inside the formal banking system that you regulate and in the non-bank financial system, which is lightly or not at all regulated. So I wanted to have your thoughts on whether we're in a position of relative safety after all the Dodd-Frank and other reforms following the 2008 financial crisis, or whether the new threats actually have brought us to another period of concern. And just to illustrate with a couple examples, inside the banking system, there's commercial real estate that has fallen in value. That affects both the banking system and non-banking financial institutions. We have the private credit market and a very active debate about its health. We have concerns about cybersecurity in the age of AI. Do you worry that another financial crisis looms out there? Of course, there's always a possibility, but is it something that's an issue of high alert, or do you feel that we're putting all the pieces in the right places?
You know, after the global financial crisis, we actually started a new division called the Division of Financial Stability, and their job is to be, you know, sort of the watchers of all financial stability issues all the time. So we're not, the old system was a crisis arrives, we get the team together and we battle the crisis. This is much more of an ongoing monitoring thing with a framework that can be checked. So I would say after the global financial crisis, which happened when you all were extremely young, between Dodd-Frank and the Basel agreements, we pretty dramatically raised the amount of capital and liquidity that the largest firms and other banks have. And I think that's been a good thing. I think they're also much sort of more transparent and more aware of their risks and that kind of thing. So I think we've significantly hardened the system against the kinds of things that happened in the global financial crisis, where you had a lot of credit losses really around mortgages. And so that kind of a situation, we've got well-capitalized large banks. But that's just one part of the financial system. The capital markets, the US has by far the largest capital markets sector relative to the banking sector. The other countries still have a much bigger banking sector relative to their capital markets. And, you know, that's going to be less well regulated, and that's a good thing. You want it to be the place where biotech companies can do IPOs, and they may or may not succeed, but they can get capital out of that market. And you know you're taking a lot of risk, but great things happen because people put money into biotech. So we've done some hardening of that, but we shouldn't be trying to regulate risk out of existence. So I think, and we did fix some of the things that broke in the global financial crisis and the pandemic, we did address. The real thing, though, is the financial sector is just always evolving rapidly. And I think the vigilance is what you need. You just need to always know that there's another thing coming. I think in particular, we've had all kinds of financial crises, but we've never really had a successful cyber attack on a large financial utility, let's say, or financial institution. And that would be quite a different thing. You know, if people are going to lose money in a certain part of the economy, we have a hugely resilient financial system now. It's more, let me say this, it's more about resilience than it is about avoiding crises. One of our former people used to say that we're in the levee building business, not the hurricane prevention business, right? So there are going to be hurricanes, and they're going to come, and you just have to assume you won't know what direction or what the nature of it will be. So you want a highly resilient financial system, and we do have that. But again, nobody who's in that business will ever give you a green light. They'll always say, here, these are the risks, and we got to monitor. You mentioned private credit. So private credit is something as you guys are probably following. It's a relatively small part of a very large asset pool. We're watching it super carefully, as everyone is. We're talking to the people in the industry and investors and everything. I think we understand it. We're monitoring it for looking for things that might lead to greater contagion or greater losses or connections to the banking system. And you know, we're going to do that. Again, you're not going to hear people say, "Oh, there's no problem here," because that's a jinx. But nonetheless, it's something that we're following very carefully.
What is one of your biggest regrets in your time as Fed chair? And on the other hand, what is something that you're very proud of?
You know, on regrets, I don't allow myself the luxury of that. I think it's really important that in my job, I'm focused on the windshield and not the rear view mirror. And so I don't. I'm tempted to say regrets, I've had a few, but then again, not so many, or whatever the line is from that Frank Sinatra song. So I just think I'll have plenty of time for that after I'm out of this role. But honestly, you just have to keep looking at the next thing. You can't be berating yourself for the mistakes that you've made. You're going to make mistakes, and you're going to learn from them. Take it from an expert. I've made plenty, but I don't focus on regrets and things like that. You know, overall, in terms of what I'm proud of, I'm more than happy to talk about that.
Let's go for it.
Yeah, let's go deep there. Basically, I'll just say it's an incredible honor to do public service, as many of you will find out at some point in your life. I always wanted to do some of it. I saw these people around Washington who were well-known public servants like George Shultz. I would think that looks like a really interesting thing to do. It's different, you know. In the private sector, I love my years in the private sector.
He loves the private sector.
There really is a feeling of what you're doing is ideally helping all Americans and that kind of thing. It's a great honor to serve the public, and particularly in a job like this. So that is the main thing I'm proud of is, you know, 14 years at the Fed and 8.5 of them as chair. I'll always be proud of that.
And I'm very grateful to you for your service to our country.
Thank you.
So if you were willing to share publicly some advice that you would give to the next Fed chair, we'd love to hear it.
So one thing you will learn when your children are grown up and they have their own children is never volunteer advice. Only give advice when asked. So, and I would only give advice if asked, and I would do it privately. But I'll just say in general a couple things about the Fed. It is very, very important to stick to your knitting and to stick to the things that were actually assigned. And there's always a temptation to want to move into other areas. And I think we have very powerful tools. They're supposed to be for maximum employment and price stability and financial stability. There's always a time when an administration looks and says, it would be good to use that tool for something else. What if we were just to and call that that's part of the mandate? Happens all the time, and we just have to be in a situation where we're not trying to work against any politician or any administration, but we have to be careful to stick to what we're doing. The other thing is, I'll just note that, you know, the Fed's not a perfect institution. Don't look for perfection. What we do is very challenging and highly uncertain.
Yep.
But it's a great American institution, and I'm very proud to work with the people I work with. They're extraordinary right across the board, an incredible group of people. And I'll just close by saying it's very hard to build great democratic institutions and much easier to bring them down.
So, though you were uncomfortable giving unsolicited advice to your successor, I know that the students in this room would love to hear your advice. They've asked me for my advice and asked me what you would advise them. So they're entering into an uncertain time, an economy where new job formation is lower.
Yeah, good luck, y'all
reasons.
effed. That's what you should say. You're
Particular
all effed.
jobs
There's been no
that
job
were
growth,
plentiful
no job
a couple
creation.
of years
You're all
ago for students coming out of college are no longer so. And AI sits as this remarkable technological transformation that is both promising and existentially threatening. So if you're advising the 600 students that sit here today, what would you suggest they think about as they embark on both academic and then ultimately professional careers?
Let me start by saying that I'm well aware, and my colleagues too are well aware of the current situation for students coming out. It's a time of very low job creation. And also you have AI going on. You've got the effects on job creation of significant changes in immigration policy, which have brought down both demand and supply of workers. The unemployment rate is really low, but that doesn't help you if you're coming into that kind of market. So
Good luck,
it's a time when the business, I mean, there's a business cycle, right? And you're coming out in the business cycle at a time when getting hired is a little bit challenging. There's also probably something more longer term, more secular that's happening and around technology and AI. So yes, it is a challenging time, but I'll say a couple things.
It's a challenging time.
One just is that the U.S. economy, compared to other major open economies and big market-based economies around the world, is just incredibly dynamic and productive.
That is facts.
Since World War II, U.S., compared to other, again, large, mature economies, our productivity has grown at like twice the speed, for example, in Europe, and higher productivity is the way, compensation and earnings can grow over time. So it's an incredibly flexible and dynamic economy. It reinvents itself. Technology, it always comes from the United States. So just be optimistic about the medium and longer term. I'm very optimistic about the medium and longer term.
What makes us great? Technology and advancements.
The other thing is, my observation is that these large language models make people much more productive. I feel like it's making me more productive because I can learn things really quickly. And I talk to my son and others who are out there in the world, and I think if you use it well, it's making you more productive. So I think you're in a situation where you need to invest the time to really master the use of these new technologies, and that should stand you in good stead. But there's no denying it's a challenging time to enter the labor market, but it may take some patience and all that. But in the longer term, this economy is going to give you great opportunities, and just be a little optimistic about that.
So when you talk about the longer term, are you talking about 10 years, 20 years, 40 years? Are you worried that there'll be wind at our back as we use these tools over the next decade, but at some horizon, let's say 40 years, there'll be substitution rather than complementarity?
It's so hard to say. I mean, a lot of people, you talk to business people, are talking about, the sort of the next few years being big years for AI to come in, but they're mostly talking about existing, middle management, back office jobs and things like that. I don't think it shouldn't have those kinds of effects on people who can use AI well and that kind of thing. I don't know, but so certainly the next few years look like whatever the effects are, we'll start to feel them, because
not sure that helps
major
you
U.S. companies, and we talk to a lot of those people who run those companies, and they're all looking at what they can do, and the truth is they can take out a lot of jobs that can be automated by a very smart large language model. They just can, and they will, because their competitors are doing it, and they can't afford to have higher costs than their competitors. What's that going to mean for you? it may not mean that much. It depends on what you're going to wind up doing. You know, you may stay in school a little bit, and you may do something that is, it's going to create new jobs too over time. And again, it makes people more productive. I did talk to a CEO in tech world who said the marginal benefit of a new employee in this world is actually very high. Now, that's not what you hear all the time. So I don't know. I mean, when, you know, if you look back through history to generalize, this has been going on for a couple hundred years. This, you know, since the loom was invented, right, and to put all the people who were doing weaving out of business. But so, in all cases, it has wound up raising productivity and raising living standards as long as the society keeps producing people who have the skills and aptitudes to benefit from that technology. So that will be the case here. But you're right, there can be a period during which it's challenging, and this may be one of those, but nonetheless, I would just say it's out there, and it's out there to be done, and I would be medium and longer term very optimistic about this economy compared to any other economy.
Terrific, thank you so much. We're now gonna open it up to your questions.
Here we go.
So I think I've got Jason and David.
This is why we're watching
in the well, and I've got two.
This is why we're watching this, guys. This is live at Harvard, and so we're gonna have students ask questions here. And honestly, the questions so far have been really good. This has not been a nothing burger. He's commented on.
When you're making decisions at the Fed, I'm curious, how much are you relying on very specific economic models? The Fed has its own big fancy model, ''FOMC''. How much are you relying on information you get from talking to people out in the real world, to businesses? Your own intuition and experience? What do you bring together as a way of thinking about these decisions with a role of economics, but everything else that feeds into it?
So it's really all of the above. We have to start with the perimeter. You know, the reserve banks are in touch. They're in all 50 states, right? 12 reserve banks, and they bring summaries of these extensive conversations they have with the public sector, the private sector, universities, healthcare, everything in their district. And we see all of that in the beige book and in the meetings. We get all of that. We also look at several models. It's never just the 𝐓OMC model. It's many, many different models, and we look at different alternative simulations. You look at all of that, and then we look at where our policy stance is, and we look out the window and we say, does it look like our policy stance is affecting the economy in a way that moves us closer to our goal variables or keeps us at our goal variables? You do all of that. We also talk to each other. You know, I talk to the other 18 participants on the FOMC a couple of times each cycle, and people have different thoughts and ways of thinking about things. Talk to the senior staff. You know, they've been doing this longer than any of us. So all of those things go into it. I wouldn't say, you know, I mean, so a good analogy is, when I was in the private equity business, we had really good models of companies, and my big boss said, we want to have the best model in the industry, but if you think that model is going to make the decision for you, you're in the wrong business. So the models are just illustrative. We cannot model the U.S. economy with the kind of precision that we will never be able to probably. It's like modeling the weather. You can't predict it 2 months away. So it's all of those things, Jason.
That's fair.
Thank you.
Okay, so David, why don't you pick the first hand, and then Jason, you'll get the second hand. And then we'll go to the balcony, so looking for someone upstairs.
I would like to ask
my name is Fabio. I'm a first year studying economics and government. I'm really interested in kind of the decision making in the Fed. How do you work with situations where like the decision might be very tight, and like sometimes there's like expectations of like the interest rates increasing, or it might be very tight, and those very tight decisions, like how do you end up making the decision?
So remember, I'm one of 12 voters.
By vote, Fabio.
So
come on now, Fabio, let me down.
An FOMC cycle is about 7 weeks between meetings. We have 8 of them a year. So, and I would say sort of 3 weeks before the meeting, by then, I have to have a pretty good sense of what I think we need to do. And staff will already have been working on, if we're doing anything in particular, we always have like a special topic. So a lot of work is going on. So I almost need to make a decision about the probable thing we're going to do. And then I have to talk to everybody a couple of times, because I got to get people to vote for this. And I've got a lot of it is finding out where the sentiment of the committee is. I've been working with these people for many years, so most of the time I kind of know how they'll approach a problem. That's how it works. So it's a lot of talking and listening and understanding. I think an underrated skill is in listening to people. Listening is, if you listen to people and you hear them and you can make their argument and they understand that you're actually listening to them and not just, communicating at them, for most of the people, most of the time, that's going to be enough. And by the way, that's true on Capitol Hill. That's true. It was true when I was a governor. If I always felt like Ben Bernanke or Janet were listening to me, and if they could engage with the points I was making, then I felt like I could support what they wanted me to support. So it's a lot of that, though. I mean, it's a lot of committee management. The big part of it is to have active dialogues going with all of the FOMC participants, and by the way, also with all the senior staff who've been doing this a very long time, and they bring, in many cases, they bring history going back many years. For example, in the public communications that we make, somebody who's been doing that for 30 years will tell you don't use that word, even though that word might make sense in another context.
Amen. 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 Preaching, listening, that's actually awesome.
Good morning, Mr. Powell. I wanted to ask you a bit more about private credit markets and particularly rising defaults among non-bank lenders like Blue Owl Capital. So I wanted to ask, to what extent could stress in these private credit markets spill over into the traditional banking system?
So that's the question we ask ourselves quite a bit, and as I mentioned, we're watching very carefully. Of course, what you can read in public. We're also getting the backstory from the people who run these organizations, and from all the banks. The supervisors are well aware of what the bank's exposure is and what is not. And I'm reluctant to say anything that suggests that we're dismissive of the risk, but we're looking for connections to the banking system and things that might result in contagion. We don't see those right now. What we see is, a correction going on, and certainly there'll be people losing money and things like that. But it doesn't seem to have the makings of a broader systemic event. But again, we never give a clean bill of health. We just keep watching for that. We don't see those characteristics though right now.
Let's go to the balcony, and remember to share your name when you begin your question.
Yes. Great. Fabio here, guys. Fabio.
Hi, my name is Cody. Thank you so much for being here, Mr. Powell. My question is about whether international relations has impact on your decision making. I know you mentioned that the Fed's job is to do exactly what's best objectively for the American economy, but I'm wondering, if you're competing with, let's say China or other powerful countries, whether or not you would kind of cut interest rates or do something like that to stimulate the economy to kind of get ahead of other countries?
No, it doesn't. We're always asking the question, as you suggest, what we serve the American public always in all of our decisions, and what is best for them. How do we achieve maximum employment and price stability on a sustainable basis? That's what we're always asking. We do meet with, in Basel, the central banks all meet without the finance ministries, and we can talk privately about what's going on in global financial markets. It is a global economy. We all know each other, and frankly, many of us have regular communications going on just privately, or by telephone, or email and text and things like that. But we're never looking to get on the turf of the national security people or the State Department or things like that. We're not looking at things that way. We're looking at our goals. That would be, I think, a classic case of mission creep if we were to say, hey, let's deviate from just chasing these two goals and let's do something for a third purpose. That would almost by definition make us less effective at the things we're supposed to be doing. So we try to stick to that.
Okay, great. David, you're next.
Good morning. My name is Jenny, and thank you so much for coming. We're all very honored that you took the time to come. So last lecture, we learned about soft landings and about how it's definitely much more ideal than hard landings, but in the US history, we've had far more hard landings than soft landings. And we were just talking about how it's really important that you are monitoring expected inflation. And I think a lot of that just comes down to the trust between the public and the central bank. And the central bank is known to be much more technocratic, but I think especially with like the rise of populism and previous events, there seems to be a lot of impact of like political tensions between, or cooperation between the Fed chair position and the administration. And I wanted to ask you, how do you still keep the public's trust this way?
By sticking to our jobs and doing them well, ultimately. If we deliver the maximum employment and price stability, or at least are seen to be doing everything we possibly can as we meet various shocks and multiple supply shocks in recent years, the public keeps its faith in us. And if you look, we look at things like longer-term inflation expectations, and you'll see that they've remained pretty well anchored right through all of this. So if you really think inflation is going to be higher, you can make some money betting against that. But people don't do that. The people who are putting their money to work in the financial markets, not to give too much credit to that, but that's it. If we stick to our knitting and we do our jobs, we stay out of politics, stay out of the hot political issues of the day, and just do your job and keep your head down. I think I see this through my dealings with elected people. If they get the sense that you're not there to deliver talking points, you're there to listen to them, and you're really somebody who's committed to doing your job and sticking just to that job, and that's all you want, and you're not going to get into politics, that's what we need to do. And I think generally, I think we are accepted in that spirit in Washington, and I think generally around the country as well.
Jason. Remember to tell us your name.
Maybe it's Jason Casper. Maybe he's over there.
Thank you, Chair Powell, for being here. My name is Jake. As you know, your term ends in May, and a potential successor, Kevin Warsh, has indicated a desire to cut rates if he fills the role of chair. What is your take on the effect that a cut would have on the flexibility of the Fed to remain well positioned to maintain both sides of its dual mandate, particularly given the fact that inflation has remained elevated above the Fed's 2% target for several years now, and progress is further halted by the oil shock and tariffs especially?
Jake?
Jake, I will fight you here. That's
not something I'm gonna swing at, that pitch. Is that a Red Sox jersey, by the way?
Shit on him, pal. Shit on him.
Yeah, okay. I know this must be Red Sox country.
So we're going to go to the balcony next.
He just shouldn't have started with the Walsh comment, and then he probably would have answered it. He's not going to answer anything that has to do with like his replacement.
Hi, my name is 𝐂𝐴𝐻
politics.
So earlier you said that you don't know how much you believe in something until someone tries to take it apart. So my question was, what's the thing you currently believe about the economy that you're least confident in?
Ooh,
interesting question.
Great question. Great question. Get him, kids. This is why this was going to be good. It's because these kids are they're not going to care.
I'm not going to give you a particular individual thing at the moment, but I will say that I would say this, and of course this is self-serving to an extent, but having worked in the private economy for most of my career, I don't have any predisposition to believe that models can really capture it, because so much of it is animal spirits, as Keynes called it, and also again, I go back to the weather. Will we ever be able to predict the weather with any precision three months ahead, other than the seasons? So the economy, no one has been able to really successfully predict the economy. So I think the temptation is always to place too much sort of stock in in models or in one particular outlook. The other thing is, which is a big takeaway, is about fat tails, right? So famously, there's a normal distribution, and the tails are what they are.
Okay.
It's not a normal distribution. The tails are fat, and however fat you think they are, they're fatter than that. The possibility for the economies at any given time is so much broader. For example, the pandemic inflation. We'd spent 15 years with the inflation below target, And that was at a time of QE and lots of fiscal stimulus and that kind of thing. We had inflation below target. And people, pretty much the profession had, the big problem the whole profession was trying to solve was how do we get inflation up to 2%? That was really the problem. And then along comes the pandemic inflation and bang, suddenly you have a 40-year high inflation. So it's hard to keep your mind open to just how broad the possibilities are.
I like a big fat tail. I think we all like a big fat tail.
Hi, my name is Robert. Thank you so much for being here. I'm a first year studying econ, math, and philosophy.
No one cares. Sorry,
so many economists that I've listened to, at least retroactively, say that what we really needed during the COVID pandemic was around $3 trillion, and the government printed something along $6 trillion more than that. And so inflation rose, but that money is still out there. So if rates come down, obviously you took initiative and you raised them very significantly. If rates get lowered again to, let's say, 2% or so, do you think that the price spikes have already played out, or do you think that all that extra money being out there will, on top of, instability geopolitically, do you think that's going to push us back into an inflationary spiral? And then also I was wondering, for your next press conference, are you going to start it with good afternoon or hello, everyone?
The real questions.
Let's talk about that later.
So we can bet on it on Polymarket.
Sorry, the first question was
the expansion of the money supply.
Yeah, no, so I think monetary quantities are a very challenging way to try to think about inflation and the economy. There was a time when the profession thought that, monetary quantities and inflation were tightly linked, and of course, in an abstract way or in a simple
guy's got
model,
Polymarket open on his phone.
If you don't increase the amount of goods and you double the amount of money, then the price has to go up. But there has been relatively little correlation. And my story of the pandemic inflation would not be about monetary quantities mainly. I'm not saying it might not have played a role. It was more, you did have a lot of stimulus, particularly in the United States. At the same time, we were looking at the possibility of another Great Depression. We didn't know whether there would ever be a vaccine. We didn't know what this was going to be. How many millions of people was the disease going to kill? So literally, for the first time probably ever, we're looking at little alternative simulations that are a Great Depression lasting many years. So we did a lot of stimulus. And then when the global economy reopened after shutting down, you had this burst of demand, red hot demand, and constrained supply still. So automobiles is a great example. Everybody wanted a car because they didn't want to take public transportation, and they'd all moved to the suburbs and out of the city. So I need a car, and yet you couldn't make cars because you couldn't get the semiconductors. So you're looking at a vertical supply curve. So a little bit of demand drove prices up a lot. Then, of course, we took the view, my colleagues and I did, that a vertical supply curve works both ways. If a little bit of demand could bring that price right down, and also it won't be vertical forever. It'll start. You'll get supply side healing. You got those two things. It was always both supply and demand for me, and you got inflation coming down very sharply in 23 and 24. We got close to the end of your question. We got pretty close to 2% by the end of 24. Now we were just dealing with the effect of tariffs, which have largely fallen here in the U.S. and not abroad. They've been less than expected because the other side, others didn't retaliate, and also because what was implemented was less than what had been announced. Nonetheless, that was the piece. We were at about 3% inflation, and somewhere between 0.5 and 0.8 of that is from tariffs. So we've been pretty close to 2% all this time. Now we have another supply shock coming. It's one of those times where you get a series of supply shocks. First the pandemic, then the much smaller one from tariffs, and then we're getting now an energy shock. No one knows how big it will be. It's way too early to know. As I mentioned, we do think our policy's in a good place for us to wait and see.
Okay. So one last question.
No, more questions. These are the best. That one guy had Polymarket open on his phone, so are you going to say good
Hi, Mr. Powell, I'm Lola, and I was wondering at what point does the size of the US's debt break the point of natural systems repayment, and if that's something you're worried about now, or something you think our generation should look out for?
That's a cool question.
I don't think we know what that number is, a sort of ratio of debt to GDP, where it would be a problem. There are, of course, Japan being a great example, there are countries that have much higher levels of sovereign debt to their GDP than we do. What's clear is that our debt is growing much faster. The federal government debt is growing substantially faster than our economy, and that ratio is going up. And in the long run, that's kind of the definition of unsustainable. The level of the debt is not unsustainable, but the path is not sustainable. And so it's really important that we get back to, we don't have to pay the debt down. We just need to have primary balance and begin to have the economy actually growing better, growing more quickly than the economy. It will not end well if we don't do something fairly soon. This is not the Fed's job, of course, and I pretty much limit myself to those high-level points which essentially everyone ignores.
So we're going to thank Chair Powell, but let me just describe the sequence of events that now follows. So first we'll thank Chair Powell. Then anyone who wants to is welcome to join us on the stage, and we'll take a group photo with Chair Powell. Because of a tight schedule, there can't be any selfies, because if there's one selfie, there's 600 selfies. Right. So you'll need to make do with one photograph of the entire class with our esteemed guest. But before we do that, please join me in warmly thanking Chair Powell.
Chair Powell. Chair Powell, warmly thanking Chair Powell. Why did all the students, why did none of them have a voice? Jesus. Why did they all lose their voice? What's going on over there at Harvard? Tim T-Dog, I'm pretty sure is a bot, because he said he'll see us tomorrow, but I don't think he's ever been here. I don't think he's ever been here. Didn't really reply to anybody else talking. That was interesting. That was better than I would have assumed for sure. We actually got some hard-hitting questions, we got some questions on the economy, on fiscal policy. We learned that Chair Powell's educational background is weirdly similar to mine. I don't know. We both have like a political science degree, and both didn't really love econ in college. Wow, we just have so much in common. What I'm getting to is that, like, I should just be the next chair, right? Just vote for me. It's not a voted position, but just vote for me for it. Yeah, easy peasy. I guess you're gonna take a picture. We didn't even get to see the picture, which was lame. What else? What else was good? I don't know. Chair crown, 26, exactly. I can be the Fed chair in your hearts, no matter what. God, it's gonna be so lame when Powell's gone. Whoever they replace him with is not gonna be as interesting. Not at all. They're gonna be boring. During the stream, let's see. During the stream, we had a lot of charts that we looked over. Let's just randomly tab through them. Robinhood, you look terrible. Hood looks awful. After hitting all-time high, falling back below previous all-time high, it is rejecting from that previous all-time high. Now testing basically the only support for, I don't know, 50% down. Robinhood just has to bounce here or it's cooked. Using that logic, yeah, maybe you look for the contrarian trade. Maybe you look for the long here. It's ballsy, but those trades, they fly sometimes. In bigger news, as we tab through these, S&P 500 continues to come on home. 6160. The previous all-time high last year in February. I'd call on the top again live. If only I could do this with Bitcoin, then my life would be better. But continues to just roll over like a dog. We see a death cross forming on the day, the 50 daily, coming down to meet the 200 daily, which we have rejected from. And I'm starting to think that basically, if 6100 likely going to line up timing-wise with the death cross, likely going to mark the bottom. Just, I don't know why, the last few years, death crosses have just marked the bottom on everything. But no bullishness in my book on S&P 500, at least until 6100's hit. At this point, we're getting real close. looking for an 11% drawdown. I told you guys I'd open a 401k at 6,100. I think I should probably get that ready. I think it's coming. Interesting to me, RUT 2000, the small caps, not showing the same strength as, well, I'll say strength, even though they're not showing strength, DGI and S&P. Not finding support where I would assume it would find support. Let's put it that way. RUT looks like it's about to take another leg down after already back testing its previous high. I don't know. I'm not really sure what to think about here. This long trade is sketching me out a little bit. I don't like this revisitation of the low. I thought we were going to get a stronger bounce. DJI perfectly back to 4,500 after the infamous $50,000 call we all remember. Back to previous highs. So DJI actually the most developed in the sense of, I'll say, the structure of this pattern, right? Last year's swing high to swing low into Q1 or April, Q2, back testing, looking for a bounce here. That's what I'm looking for in the S&P 500. So if DJI begins to bounce, I don't know, even into next week, into the beginning of April, likely a good sign that the S&P will also follow. It's just interesting. Like DJI, I expect to reverse. RUT could, but it's looking weak. And then S&P still has room. They're not as cleanly together as I would expect. But these indices are definitely worthy of watching. Definitely worthy of keeping your eyes on into April. The biggest player today, I think, is going to be the dollar. The dollar is breaking out. Tweeted it earlier. Told you at the beginning of the stream. We're seeing it while we're live. The dollar here breaking to a higher high after retesting this 100-ish mark many, many times on high time frames. The dollar looking good. If you look at these other currencies, pretty much everything we tabbed through just casually in the background of that live, you'll find that they all look super bearish, with the exception of the Swiss franc. The Swiss franc actually looking pretty good. Maybe even looking to retest its all-time highs from 2011, about 1.4. This is the only one that looks good. Everything else in the weighted basket of the Dixie kind of crumbling. The most severe, in my opinion, be the South Korean won, which is all but ready to test all-time lows. Unable to find bids, looking to fall further either into this month or into April. But that's really across the board. There are a few that maybe are neutral, but big ones like the JPY looks absolutely terrible. Lower lows to come. British pound, I'm more split on. Certainly doesn't look great. Doesn't look great, but not quite, I don't know, not crazy bearish like JPY. And those factors pushing the dollar up, obviously riding the coattail of oil. Oil remains the long, remains the strongest asset, the strongest trade, in my opinion, at least this week and probably for the foreseeable short-term future. Oil beasting, projecting from 101, finding a higher low, and into Friday, into Monday, now above those previous highs, breaking resistance. I mean, looking for retests of our local highs, right? 115 on WTI crude, Brent even more bullish somehow. I don't really get how these can look different. Aren't they the same thing? Aren't they just looking at the same assets? I don't know. Brent already back up there, painting exactly what you want to see, man. Retests of your high, resistance weakening, buyers coming in earlier, catching the lows, pushing it back up. There are some decent upside targets for Brent if it breaks 119. The previous, the previous all-time high? Let me look. Previous all-time high of Brent at 135 would be the obvious upside target if on a break of 120. I think 150 is a great target. It is our 1618 extension from our pullback locally, and 175 at our measured move up there. Anything on the table. Absolutely on the table. While those are pushing, the dollar is likely moving as well. I showed you guys the Tesla trade to catch up here. Just trying to run over everything that I missed. Tesla trade, you saw me place it live. I think it was on Friday or Wednesday of last week at 360. A Tesla trade on FEMX, one of our exchange partners. riding pretty well, up about 10%. It was down. The trade was down for a total of 2 hours since it opened. And sitting at 163, not a huge gain or anything, but it just took this, saw the setup and took it. Been having a hard time longing anything in the crypto realm, so decided maybe I'll try my foot in some TradFi longs for the moment. Not looking necessarily for all-time highs on Tesla, but back to the 200-day is at 400. That's a solid 33% gain. On 10X, about 330% gain. Maybe 413. I'll kind of update as that goes. On the flip side, Coinbase following to a T. I should have traded this. God dang. Long, perfect close, perfect reversal. Here we are down at 163. At this point, I mean, a retest of 150 is the close of the short position that I had telegraphed there, but it almost feels like you might want to just keep it open. Retesting 150 again, I think, leads you to lower numbers, maybe 115. This chart looks so crap. Looks absolutely crap. Circle continues to bleed off. Not a lot of change there. I'm not touching this till lower, much lower. Tau, you guys keep requesting it. Tau's 200-day moving average lines up really well with previous resistance at 285. I think that if you're looking to trade this or looking to enter this, 285 is likely coming. I would hope to enter at some point at 285 before the 50-day moving average catches up with price and performs a golden cross. On that golden cross, I'd probably look to get out of that position no matter where it is if I hadn't taken profit yet. For some reason, this chart won't let me like go back. I can't undo like I can in all the other charts. It's weird. Is there anything else? Ethereum, long is still alive. Little dip again at 1950. Very limited upside so far on that trade, but I think at this point, stop moved up, maybe even take profit, move down, and just let it play. TRX remains the sleeper. TRX just doing its own thing. I kind of keep waiting for this to collapse, and it doesn't, and I don't really know why. That's okay. While it is right back to resistance, definitely a sketchy time for a long, this thing has just performed almost like with no regard to the rest of the cycle of crypto. There's definitely a correlation with your highs and your lows, timing with the crypto cycle highs and lows, but really just up and to the right. The one thing that does concern me is the price action since October of last year, and since obviously crypto got a little crippled, does look a little different than the rest of its history. It looks a little, floppier, rounder, not quite as tight. I don't really know how to interpret that. It's just something I'm keeping an eye on. TRX has now crawled up into like almost the top 10. Pretty weird stuff. NVIDIA is doing NVIDIA. SEI, I don't know why I pulled this up. I think somebody said, Bones Jones might have said it earlier. SEI looks totally cooked. This is what happens with the VC-funded poop coins. You're at all-time low, and it doesn't seem to be finding a floor. I guess I'll put an alert like 5 cents on this, and maybe we'll check back if it ever goes off. TBD. Tether dominance looking really strong, which is crap for the crypto space. I think that our descending wedge, whatever, flag, whatever you want to call it, we're seeing a breakout, likely going to see a little bit of downside, finding a higher low before pushing higher, just like we saw back at the end of last year. Okay, I think I got through all those little charts. I actually didn't talk about Bitcoin at all today. Weird. Bitcoin, last one, then I'll pull it to the chat, and then, we'll see what's good. But Bitcoin fell out of the ascending channel. It's the same price action as November into January from last year. Same thing happened. We fell out of the ascending channel, back tested it, and we moved lower. So basically following that as a guide, it feels like a scalp short, at least, if not some kind of even longer played position, is the play on Bitcoin. Certainly anything can happen, but this is really lining up exactly the same as last time. I'm praying and hoping that we just continue up. We go higher, but man, this is brutal. Downside targets, obviously, the 60,000 we tapped in February. Our 200-week moving average is at 59,000, right below price. And when you get lower than that, the numbers get sadder. I don't know, maybe like 50,000. 50,000. We have broken April's low. We found resistance there. If we lose February, probably looking for what is the last major leg of the bearish cycle. That would make sense. Oh, my cousin from Italy is here. No, it's just not here. It's Thursday she gets here. What day is it today? Monday. Good. I'm in my own head. The moving has gotten me so distracted. I'm almost done. Should be pretty much done today. By Wednesday when we stream again, I should be all set up. Should be streaming from the new place. It'll be a good time. I don't know. How are we feeling about Bitcoin? Just nothing has changed. We're just in the same price range. We're maybe following the same price action we saw. It doesn't seem like there's a lot of changes to sentiment, even changes to price, changes to honestly anything. It's not a lot of changes here. Just, it feels like the whole space is sitting and waiting for a dump. But that's okay. That's how it is sometimes. What do we got? Powell still speaks. He finished. You can go back and watch it. But yeah, we saw some miners sell Bitcoin. That honestly, though, you know, that's a kind of a scary headline to read. But miners are always selling Bitcoin, and I do understand that the recent sell that people are talking about was a bigger sell. It was like $1 billion, you know, all at once. But miners are the organic selling pressure in the Bitcoin ecosystem. Miners have overhead. There's a cost to mining, and so they must regularly sell to cover those costs. It's a good thing. I think it's a good thing because what it does is it puts new coins into circulation. That's just the ebb and flow that, you know, we've had in this space that we've had in Bitcoin with proof of work. And it certainly would be great if nobody ever had to sell any of it, right? But that is normal. Miners aren't the enemy. Miners are the supporters of the network. The cost that they incur is the cost of the network. It's the cost of business, right? Very normal. I wouldn't worry too much. Seeing treasuries start to dump Bitcoin, I think we might have seen one. It's something that we all have been aware of. We all have like pretty much been waiting for this since we heard about Bitcoin treasuries over the last few years. It's like this is just going to come. You know, it was a fad people jumped into, and it's going to be a fad that they jump out of. And hopefully that helps bring capitulation, that helps bring a bottom or a low that we can see big bounces from, similar to 2021, right? All the liquidations in the world, all the scariness here, and we just floated back up. We just found a bottom from it. Oh. Let me refresh the chat. What did I miss today? Did I miss anything? It's my price prediction to Bitcoin. Low. If we're talking, like, what's my prediction if we're just following a 4-year cycle, if we're basing it on what we've seen in the past? Here-ish. I guess 75%, I believe, last time. 75. 77% drawdown from the high to the low. I think it makes sense to look for a lessened drawdown. How much so, though, is really a hard question. I don't know if that's like a knowable answer, but I think this gives, you know, let's say 70%. This gives us something, right? It gives us a range. If we're looking at a typical bear market, there you go. Like 30, 37. If it's the same drawdown as last time, which I think is unlikely, then you're looking at like 28, 30, maybe mid 30s, 40s. Anything is possible. You can always see stuff change, mix up, play out differently. Once I got the close door. Powell said anything interesting? Well, he's done talking. He did. It was there have been more boring and less productive Powell meetings. Absolutely. Did I miss anything? Didn't miss any charts. No bottom this time soon. Is that the 200-day? That was a 200-week. The 200-day is high above us right now. 200-day is all the way up here, like 90K. 200-week is down here, yeah. Which is interesting if we continue trading sideways for another month. If we don't see a breakdown in April, the 200-month or 200-week will catch up with February's low. It'll cross over 60K, which would be an interesting maneuver for price. No bottom anytime soon. I mean, you'd think this cycle will be like the last cycle, then you would be looking for your bottom to be right about here. Not that far away. Also, uncomfortably far away. 200 days. Around October. Don't want to wait that long, but yeah, if you compare it to the last things to what we've seen in the past, that's what we're looking for. It's hard to deviate. I truly do believe that all of the cycle, 4-year cycle, all of this will break down eventually. I would love for that to be right now. I would love to see something new happen to throw that model out the window. But until we see some kind of deviation from that course, it just doesn't make sense. As someone who follows charts, there's just nothing there to compel me otherwise. So until we see something invalidating, could be trading up here above 100,000, likely invalidating of like a 4-year cycle typically. I guess there's other ways, but I'll just leave it with the high number, like trading above 100K. Until we see something that invalidates it, doesn't make sense for me. So I'm going to be looking for an October low. Doesn't mean that price has to go significantly lower. If I were to bet, just a generalized bet on what price action will do, following what we've seen in other bear markets, it would likely be one more leg down, and then bring us wherever, like 50K, maybe below 50K, one more leg down, followed by like a fake recovery that drops us lower but doesn't actually bring us to another leg down, like maybe a small 10% something from the low, equating to one more big painful move, a lot more time of scary, boring, stressful, that resolves in a tiny move to the downside that marks the bottom into Q4 of this year. Like, until something deviates from that, that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking like Justin Timberlake. Maybe I am Justin Timberlake. I don't know why. Is it this haircut? People keep saying that. I'll take it, though. He's a handsome fella. He's a handsome fella. No, what's really funny, though, is people used to say that to me a lot when I was younger, that I looked like him. But if you go back and look at both of us when we were really young, we look nothing alike. I don't know. It's weird. Missing a perm coming next. What's up, New Boy? Think we bought him this summer? I mean, that'd be great. That'd be awesome. I need to see something. Need to see something compelling that is different than all the cycles we've seen. Something that gets us out of trouble. May or October. May would be great. That'd be awesome. How you doing, Casper? What's up, Martin? I want to compare down, make sure. Yeah, I mean, that's what I did, basically. Yeah. The last bear market, we saw 77% drawdown from the all-time high, from 66K. The time before that, it was more like 84% from 20K to 3K, 84%. So 84%, 77%. We can subtract 7 again. You know, I think that's a dumb way to do it, but it's probably worse ways to do it. Look for a 70% drawdown, and that brings you to 38K. Just at the lowest price, just below the lowest price ETFs ever bought at. we did speculate all the way back here in 24 during the ETF stuff that maybe the most painful outcome of the bear market would be to pierce that ETF low. ETFs have since never seen lower prices than right into listing, into like the first week of listing. Never was revisited. Game theory wise might make sense. Might be interesting. You need cheering up. So you need to, so what ticker will cheer you up, Charlie? What tickers do you need to see? That's funny. I'm going to be done moving today. Well, pretty much. What do you think about CB going against Clarity Act? I don't think the Clarity Act is good. I don't think it's good. Dude, there's nothing the government has done, and nothing this administration or the last administration has done has resulted in any positivity of our market. I think the Clarity Act is designed for banks. I'm not a Coinbase shill. I think it's like, I feel like it's just designed for banks. They want the yield. They don't want people getting yield elsewhere. I just don't think it matters. I think it's just something to talk about in the biggest picture. I think it's just something to talk about. Flash crash to 50K. I'd like that. Oscillators comparing to last time and more specific. If the Clarity Act passes, does that change my thesis about a leg down? No, bro. Of course not, Randy. No. Every time in crypto, we get jazzed up on the government doing some ETFs, whatever, CME group. Like every time, it just never plays out. It never results in like positive price action. It has always been either like marking of tops or like it just doesn't. I don't know. I would love to be, but you guys know I'm not like a narrative based person when it comes to price action. Narratives just never seem to do anything inside and outside of crypto. What else we got? How's the new place? Much newer and cleaner. It's not dusty. Feels clean. It's good. It's pretty. It's not the most expensive fancy place ever or anything, but it'll do. I'm gonna be there for a year. House hunt. See if I can find a house to buy in the meantime, where I have more time. Yeah. Clarity is greed for banks. That's how I see it. It's banks also fighting to stay relevant. So when we talk about these narratives and these big things in crypto, I do crap on them often. But what is important is not like short-term price action because of them, not whatever. The bigger picture is good when these things happen because it is showing how the world is changing around crypto, how crypto is impacting the world. The fact that banks have to fight for this crap at all, right, is showing the force that exists, the pressure that's being put on them, the pressure that is pushing them towards, I don't want to say irrelevancy, but irrelevancy. Maybe that's an exaggeration, but it is making them less relevant. I use a bank just for like the money for bills. My wealth is elsewhere. It's not in the bank. The bank wants yield. It wants to keep the yield game. If crypto can do yield without the banks, what is the bank doing, right? Why are we? They're holding our money. What are they doing for us then? They're fighting to keep relevant, and regardless of the Clarity Act passing or not passing, that is going to continue. Like banks are going to continue to make moves to try to stay relevant because money protects money. It's the easy way to put it. I'm talking about yield on dollars. You can talk about STRC. I don't know. I don't know enough about that stuff to mess with it or agree with it or disagree with it. What is it you do here, bank? What state liberty? I can't dox myself. You know, I could have cleaned and dusted my house. Well, when you move all your crap, it's been sitting there, right? Also, when you have to move out, you stop cleaning because you're like, I'll clean it when I'm done. When you move all your crap, you kick up all the dust. Also, Bean's hair. Bean's very dandruffy. She, worth it, totally worth it. But she gets the house a little dusty, if you know what I mean. She also wears shoes in the house, or doesn't wear shoes. She walks from outside to inside. Doesn't take her shoes off. I'm excited about the new place. I'm excited to be done moving. I'm excited to just be settled back down. I hate moving. Dog hair. Dude, it's hair and dander. Can we get a tour? I'll give you guys a tour then when it's all set up. Yeah. It's all set up. All right, we've been live an hour and a half. That's not bad. I appreciate you guys tuning in for 𝐒𝐴𝐺. Man, trading content live streams have really been hurting lately. Not just crypto, around the board, but crypto doubly or triply so. So I appreciate all of you guys who tune in every day. The next stream Wednesday, unless things get really spicy, which they could, will be from the new house. So make sure you tune in to help hype that up. You better. You have to. It's mandatory. I don't know if I told you that. It's mandatory. Make sure you subscribe, join the Discord, discord.gg/TomCrown. It's free. You can sign up with our exchange partners in the video description below, BYDFi and FEMX. Great exchanges. You see me trading on them live all the time. Help support the stream. They got all the pairs. They all are adding stocks and different stuff now, so they got everything you need. Check them out. If you use my link, not only will I help you if you ever have issues with them, I will help you if you have issues with them. I will also, you'll get VIP roles in our Discord. Very fancy. So there you go. Perfect deal. All right, fam. Been good. Next time you see me, hopefully I'll be all moved in and much less stressed and more focused. Have a good one. Happy Monday and stay positive.